All right, so in this lecture, we're going to be talking about a concept called ambient light. So typically in a scene, you have two main light sources. You have your primary light source and you have your ambient light source. So in this image here outside, the primary light source would be the sun. It's a very strong, very direct light source that's going to create really strong shadows and really strong lighting effects. Then we have what's called the ambient light. The ambient light in this scene would be the sky. The sky is a very soft light because it's being diffused throughout the atmosphere or potentially clouds. And so there's not really going to be harsh shadows from it. There's not going to be really bright lighting effects, but it's still going to be apparent. Now, most of the time, we're pretty aware of our primary light source and strong lighting, but a lot of times ambient light can go unnoticed and unappreciated when we're painting. But that's something we want to talk about so that we can understand it and apply it into our images. So, you can look here in this painting and go and grab something to write with so you can see what I'm talking about here. So, if you look, let me get a brush. Okay, here we go. So our primary light source, obviously, in this scene is coming from somewhere over here. We can tell because of the lens flare on the side, but also by the lighting running along the side of this woman's face. Okay? Now, that is sunlight, and so it's very, very strong. We have that really bright, blown out light there, and the shadows cast from it are pretty strong as well. However, we also have our ambient light source, which is the sky, which is what is lighting up the rest of her body, and so that it's not in just pure pitch black shadow. Now, the sky itself is blue, and so the light is going to be slightly blue. Now, looking at this image, you might say, well, there's no blue light shining on them, but if we look very closely, you'll see that actually there is. So, for example, right here, on her forehead, there's a shadow being cast from the primary light source, so it kind of has that hard edge there from her hat, but it's still being lit by the sky, because that has a much softer light source and it can get a lot more places than this really harsh directional light from the sun, which gives it this slightly blue sort of hue to it as it lightens up her face. Same thing on her cheek, just so ever so slightly. On her nose is a little bit there, and then also down here on her chin. If we even look over here, you can see it on her as well. She's not getting hit by any of the direct light, which means that all of the lighting on her is coming from an ambient light source. She has a little bit of slight subtle blue on her forehead and her cheeks and her nose, her lips, right? It's very, very subtle, but it exists. The place where you can see it a little bit more strongly would be on this woman's neck and collarbone back here, where there's really hardly any light getting from the primary light source. If it weren't for the ambient light, this would all be in very dark shadow. But because we have a secondary light source, this ambient light source, it lights it up and you can see it a lot more strongly because it's not competing with a stronger light source. Same on the side of her hand here and on her arm. So it's something that's very, very subtle. And you want to make sure you don't overdo it, but that it can really help a painting when you add it. So pay attention to that. It's not going to be like... it might not be very strong in every scene, and it's not always going to be blue. What you want to think about is, what is the color of your ambient light source? Maybe they are in a room with a whole bunch of torches that is making the room feel very warm and has a very yellow light to it, but in their hand they're holding some sort of magical glowing object, and that's the primary light source. Well, then your primary light source would have a bluish tint to it, and your ambient light source would be sort of a warm color. So just think about it. Walk through the process. Don't just guess. Take your time to think, what is the ambient light source in this setting, and then use that for your color. So we're going to do a little quick example here. And go ahead and delete this layer. Turn that off here. I have this T-Rex I already painted for us here. Just a quick sort of simple sketch, but we're going to use this to practice our ambient light. So all you're going to need to do is make a new layer on top of your dinosaur, and that's the layer we're going to paint on. We're going to lower the opacity of that to about 45%. And I'm imagining that in this scene, the lighting is a bluish color. So we're going to go with right about there, desaturated blue. And I'm going to go ahead and use my hard round brush for painting this. I'm just going to have the hardness be a little lower. Okay. And this is what I'm going to use to paint this ambient lighting. Now, in order to help us focus, we have the lighting on its own separate layer. This is our primary light source, and we can turn it on and off. So in order to not get distracted and kind of confuse ourselves, we're going to turn this off. But first, what I want you to pay attention to is that this primary light source is coming from sort of like a upward and to the right sort of angle. Our ambient light source is going to be kind of everywhere from up above generally, which means it's going to get a lot more this side of the dinosaur that our original light source doesn't, as well as the top of his face over here that doesn't have as much light either. So without further ado, let's go ahead and turn off this layer and let's start painting our light in. So you know what? Let's even bring this hardness down even more. All right. So we're going to start with up here on the back of his head. And we're just going to softly start painting this in. So like I said, it's not going to be too crazy, not too strong. And even after we paint this, I have the saturation or the opacity up a little bit higher because we want to be able to see what we're doing. But afterwards, I'm probably going to bring it down even lower. So it's even more subtle, but for now we'll work with this so we can kind of see our image a little better. All right, so coming down here, the back, on the tail, all of this, if there was a big soft light from above, all of this would be getting lit by this big soft light. Same thing with the leg here. Have the arm. Come all the way down here, even to this side that wouldn't normally be lit by our primary light source. And then also a little bit on his shoulder there. We have the neck, top of this little jaw here. Same thing here where that is going to kind of protrude. We have the head, which this one is going to, because this is really facing pretty much directly up, this is going to get a lot of secondary light there. It faces up towards what I'm imagining is the sky, even though this image doesn't really have a background. We're going to kind of pretend. Okay. Come over here. Get a few parts on the leg. Comes down here on the toes. This part is also totally in shadows from the primary light, but we'll still get some attention from our ambient light source. All right, and there we go. It's pretty subtle. Let's see if we need to turn it down once we turn on our primary light source. Does seem a little strong, so I'm going to take it and lower the opacity just a bit. Put it right about 23, looks good to me. You can see that it just helps add a little bit more dimension, feel like the scene is a little bit more realistic and fleshed out. When we turn it on and off, you can see the difference. There it is without it. And with it, the whole thing just has a little bit more color, a little bit more life, and a little bit more depth to it as well. So there you go. Go ahead and follow along and do the same assignment. You can download the resource, and if you want to try experimenting, you can maybe try changing the color of the primary light source and your ambient light source just to see how it affects it. But remember, you want to keep it subtle. And that's a very soft light, which means there's not going to be really hardly any hard edges. It's going to be mostly soft edges. So that'll be it for this lecture, and I will see you guys in the next one.